recording versus studio recording. What would be the benefits between the two? And is there any benefits?
I've recorded in a studio, so I can tell you some of the benefits versus some of the drawbacks. But when you're in a studio, there's a lot of equipment already set up for you. There's guys that know how to record stuff. There's audio engineers. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing, but it's a resource you can use. A lot of times they're going to have additional microphones and a stage setup and, isolation and things that you might not want to have to build out at home. And a lot of times they're going to have professional equipment that has multi-track recording with, large pieces of equipment that can handle everything at one time. And they're going to be able to guide you in a particular direction. And honestly, it's studio. Basically, it's studio by studio, just like any store or any company you deal with. They're going to have things that they're better at or not as good at. And the difference between that and being at home is being at home, you have to have that upfront cost for all that equipment, all those extra microphones, maybe even like a drum set and some, other types of instruments that they might have there already, set up and triggered, ready to go. So when you're at home, you might have to do things one at a time or three at a time, where they could do all 24 at a time, things like that. The other thing is, how experienced are you at mixing things? Are you just a musician? If you're just a musician, then you might not want to have to worry about, mixing and mastering all that stuff. And a lot of times studios will do that stuff for you and have a guy that's an expert in it. Whereas when you're doing it at home, you got to learn all that additional stuff as well as be a master at your instrument or craft or whatever you do. So that's kind of like the plus and minuses that I've seen just doing it myself over the years, being in different bands and stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say home recording has a lot of advantages too. We covered a lot of the things that are great about doing it in the studios. And
also how you write things, how to get things recorded properly. That's a whole skill set in itself, even if you're even beyond mixing and mastering. Like if you don't know how to mic a drum set, if you don't know how to mic your amp,
correct.
It can just be a mess.
I don't like
some of the drawbacks, I would say, of a studio is it's really expensive. And the sort of feeling of I have as much time as I want to experiment and play around and try this and try that. That's wonderful at home, but
your time back. Like, okay, well, we've got it booked for 4 hours, so we've got to get taken that time. And if you're at home, you're like, well, we've got lunch waiting if we want to eat it.
I really enjoy recording at home. Back in the day, I had like a 4-track cassette player thing, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's great for figuring out a song, putting a demo together or something like that. But studio was definitely superior back then. But now with Pro Tools or, whatever you guys are using as a digital audio workstation, there's so much that can be done nowadays. It's really just amazing. So, I guess I kind of prefer working at home now that all the toys are available.
Yeah, from my perspective, having never done anything with a studio and kind of learning all this from home from the start of COVID, it's forced me to learn a lot about the concept of of recording and mixing and mastering on my own, right? So and Mr. D has been my mentor through all of this because he has years of experience in the industry. So it's forced me to kind of expand my knowledge base and grow immensely from having to do things from the home perspective.
I've played in bands for 15 years and I've played at the largest venue in my area and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I kind of became disillusioned when it just wasn't fun anymore. So that's kind of a hard thing to deal with when you're not having fun. And when I'm dealing with somebody like Dr. Sector and we're having a good time, we're streaming, we're online, we're doing everything at home, and everything's not a set of rules or someone else's schedule, it becomes more of a fun thing and you could be more creative, and I really like that.
One thing I'll mention between like which do you choose, a studio or home, if you have the resources to choose, there's a difference between like a musical ear and a technical ear, right? And the studio will have the engineers there to give you the technical ear to make sure that your stuff gets recorded right. because a lot of times people will be really excited to make music and they all have like a very musical ear, but they won't necessarily be as like aware of sonic imbalances. And, you know, that's where people tend to run into trouble doing it at home.
They'll master the hell out of something that doesn't sound good to you later on, even though it hits all the levels it's supposed to hit. I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that you kind of have to train your ear over time for. I mean, I definitely can hear in my earlier recordings a difference from the later stuff. One of the things that was a huge difference for me was I upgraded to really good studio monitors, and I can just hear what's happening so much better. Prior, I had this thing, I'm sure all you guys can relate to this, where it's like you mix it down, it sounds great in your mixing environment. You're like, this is great. You take it out to the car and it sounds horrible. You listen to it in your friend's car, it sounds horrible. You listen to it on the Alexa, you know, it's like different on every single thing, and you keep tweaking things until it sounds reasonable in every listening environment. One of the things that I discovered is with really good studio monitors, if it sounds good here, it sounds good everywhere. And so that was kind of like a really eye-opening thing for me.
Yeah, monitors are like a big deal. Like for 15 years, I mixed on Yamahas, you know, NS10s, but also NS, I think like 2950s or something. I don't know. They were like a smaller bookshelf, like the Yamaha NS10. And I was so used to those speakers voicing that way that around like, I don't know. And like I could get good translating mixes with those because I knew what I was getting out of them, right?
Right.
But in my head, I was like, technology's evolved. These speakers are from the 70s. Like, surely there's better things out there. And I spent 5 years being lost, like not being able to mix or master properly because I didn't have the right monitors. And I was trying to treat my new monitors as if they were still NS10s.
Right.
Now,
Why
that
did you
work,
start making
you know?
your own monitors?
Yeah, well, I did. I started making my own monitors within the last 6 months, and that's been awesome too, because I couldn't do what I'm doing now 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. You know what I mean? Like the amount of things that I've learned on the sonic standpoint in the last 5 or 6 years has been tremendous. And so being able to take that and apply that back to like loudspeaker design is awesome.
That's cool.
So
but
what you're
yeah,
building
so
aren't studio monitors, they're loudspeakers, they're more for like venues and stuff?
oh no. I just call them loudspeakers. They're monitors, but yeah.
Okay.
You know, the ones I have back here next to the Amphions are reed paper woofers, 5.5 inch with a 1 inch silk tweeter. And I built my own crossovers. It took the third design to get it right. You know, the same drivers, but took to the third design to get the crossover right.
That's crazy,
Silk
man.
tweeters
I'm not even
those things.
thinking about
It's
trying to
very
make my
confusing.
own stuff. I barely know how to use stuff that the professionals put together.
Well, I'll tell you what, like what you were saying about having monitors and having all that lock into place for you, when finally I was like at my wit's end, and like the first VHXRR, the persistence of memory, I didn't mix or master that. We hired someone to do that. And because that is when I was lost in the wilderness and trying to figure stuff out. And hiring him, we hired a guy named Count in San Francisco. He's the guy that does all the mixing for Tycho.
Was
So,
he a
like,
vampire or does he just go by count?
He just goes by Count. But he was like brutally honest with me and told me all the ways I fucked up. And it was like super helpful. You know, there was like 3 points in my like career I can think of, like too early on in production in like hip hop and with Count, where like I was able to take a leap from there because someone like was brutally honest with me instead of like telling me everything was awesome. Because it's not always awesome. You know what I mean? And sometimes someone telling you, and like maybe his bedside manner could have been a little nicer, but you know, maybe I needed to hear it that way too, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm better for it. So
Yeah, that's cool.
So recording at home is something of a process. Is it hard to learn, or is it something you could pick up within
pick anything up pretty quickly, but it's
Mhm.
about, like getting the feedback, understanding what you're doing. I started using Cubase in like 2001, somewhere around there. And, I've made a lot of utter shit. And, hearing that and understanding that and being like, okay, I did this thing here. Let me try it this way this time. And that's, to me, the benefit of home recording is being able to actually sit there and put in the time. Whenever you've got, free minute, you can go in and just mess with stuff. And if you screw something up royally, cool. That's learning. And, that's everything I've done is just trial and error. And eventually you get, I don't even know if I'm necessarily like good at it yet, but you get proficient enough to where you at least know how to avoid some of the previous mistakes you made. But then also you run into that thing of getting like stagnated and, okay, this is the way I need to do it. And, you still have to play with stuff and just give yourself time to just fuck around.
I think that's somewhat true with like anything creative. If you fall into like a rut of this is how I do whatever task it is, because like one time you did it and it worked out good, then you start getting into this thing where you're like doing a formula, and then it becomes like a craft, not art, if you know what I mean. You're just like repeating patterns. I think that's.
But I think both are necessary. Just like anything,
Sure,
you need to find that fine line between stagnation and never progressing and just going completely avant-garde and insane.
Yeah. And back to your question, Mike, I think as far as like, is it easy? Can you get good at it fast? I think it's a little bit like playing an instrument or something. It's like, is it easy to be good at playing guitar? Well, I mean, it's going to take a long time to really be good at playing guitar. Some people might have a natural propensity towards, getting good at this or getting good at that. But I mean, getting really good at recording there's a lot of stuff to know, I would say.
I think it's like anything, that 10,000 hours time spent type of thing just to arrive, right? And then once you're there, now it's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah.
I would add to that it depends on what you're aiming for. So you can spend those 10,000 hours messing around and being avant-garde, but you could also spend those 10,000 hours studying all the different recipes and finding different ways to combine them. And I would say the recipes are a good place to start, and that kind of answers the question of, can you just pick it up and go? Yes, there are a ton of recipes out there, and I would encourage people to start from the structure of the recipes and then modify them once you know what's out there, because you don't even know what's out there yet. And without a guide like that, you're kind of just in a sea of buttons and DAWs and plugins and all this stuff that you haven't seen before. And so do I think it's easy? I think it's easy if you follow the recipes first, and then once you have a basic knowledge of how to structure something, no, you don't necessarily have to get stuck in it, but you know where all the knobs are now. You know what you can tweak, and that's what it really comes down to. What can I tweak and have it do what I want it to do? Because I've heard songs.
When you say recipes, you're talking about something like a mixing preset. Say something, okay, so Logic has this is electronic pop 80, electronic pop 90. Or are you talking about compositional recipes?
I'm talking about everything. So like you can follow a particular person on YouTube and see how they do it, and they can be a professional. You can follow Dead Mouse and see how he mixes things and follow his masterclass. And these are all different recipes, and these guys have come up with strict ways of doing things that they like to do for their genre or their particular thing. But you don't know every caveat they have. You just can only learn what they put out there. And those things end up being like a recipe of how they start, how they mix, and how they master. And once you get those things down, you can kind of tweak it to your own design,
I think, it's interesting because this overall conversation really encompasses a bunch of different skill sets. So like you could be talking about songwriting, you could be talking about mixing, mastering, engineering, like where do you put the mic on a snare drum? And that's where like what you're talking about, as far as there's a recipe, people have figured out like there's a way to mic a snare drum. There's like an appropriate mic to use, etc. Now you could come up with some weird way to do it that might be awesome and get you some unusual or interesting sound, but definitely I think when you talk about figure out how it's been done, it's definitely helpful to look these things up. Like how do people mic a drum set? Where do they put the mics? Which mics do they use? That is probably something that you can bypass a lot of pain by learning how people have been doing it since 1972 or whatever, you know?
Well, that's the other thing. You're asking like, how easy is it to pick it up at home? What are you recording? Because
Right.
it's easier to record vocals than a drum set, you know?
For sure. Yeah.
So your learning curve is going to be different based on what you're trying to record.
Yeah. And what genre? I mean, there's some stuff that you may not even ever have to mic anything. Like the entire song is all in the box, which can still be
If
great.
you're using all virtual instruments or something like that, you
Yeah.
don't even have to worry about plugging anything into your audio interface.
Yeah, I
As long
mean,
as you're
a
right there on
vast
your
majority,
desktop.
a vast majority of what we do is all in the box. Between me using Ableton and my Alesis V49 controller, right, along with all the stuff that Mr. D throws in, it's almost all in the box. So yeah.
I use a combo approach. Like I mix and master in analog, but all of my instruments are VSTs.
I kind of do a combo approach too. I use some actual live drum set, although I'll tend to sample things and create loops. I do some actual live guitar. Again, I tend to like make samples and loops out of it. So it's like kind of a hybrid, but then I'll also have what I guess would be called a drum machine. I mean, like, you know, programmed samples and patterns, and then a lot of stuff that's like, you know, patches and various, like I like Serum a lot, but you know, whatever. I don't actually do any of you guys use analog synths?
Yeah, that's about all I use. I apologize, I'm not in my studio here, but got a handful of Dave Smiths, sequentials, a bunch of Behringer, Keep Your Hate, and let's see. Yeah, the favorite is definitely the Dave Smith stuff. The OB6, you can, I mean, that'll lead anything when you mix. It'll cut through anything and it'll lead everything. A couple of analog drum machines, I love those things. A couple of sample-based drum machines or rack units.
Yeah.
Let's see, MKS 80, D110 for the roll-in stuff. Oh, geez, what else? Oh, yeah, and then Deckard's Dream. So, you know, the fake CS80. But yeah, I guess I tell you what, well, it's kind of dark. Oh, shoot, did I turn my camera off?
We lost you there.
Yeah. Occasionally I'll see some stuff on YouTube or whatever with an analog synth and think, man, that sounds awesome.
A lot of that stuff can be synthesized fairly accurately in digital now, which I know is like heresy for a lot of the analog guys.
How could you say that?
But computers are so powerful now that they can actually render out an analog signal, and you can do a lot of the same stuff without having to buy a ton of equipment. I see it more as a hobby now than a necessity, and which is great. It's a great, cool thing to do, like have live shows and have a particular. There's a certain, I guess you would call it timbre, or a lot of electronic instruments have a very wave-like timbre, so you can tell that they're generated, versus maybe like a violin or a guitar that has a bunch of chambers and straight, you know, the string echoes the neck, which echoes the soundboard, and that gives you all these different qualities to the sound that, you know, you're not going to get through a lot of digital instruments nowadays. And honestly, the digital stuff is getting so good, like he was talking about this VSTs, that we've sampled stuff to such a high quality that you can get some of the timbre that you would get from a real instrument, and you can get the analog feel that you would get from an analog instrument in a digital workspace. And it's the barrier to entry for a lot of this stuff of having an entire room full of instruments and having an entire room full of equipment has come way down to just, I have a laptop, man, and it can do a ton of crazy stuff. So
Yeah.
it just makes it so much
Yeah,
easier and fun to dive in.
but let me ask you a question. Would you rather drive a Ferrari or would you rather play, GTA?
I mean,
what it comes
if
down
I'm
to
gonna
for me.
drive the Ferrari off a cliff, I'd want GTA. You know, if
Yeah,
I'm taking somebody out to dinner, I want the real Ferrari, right? So it really just
right.
depends on what you're trying to do. If I was doing a live setting and I
Mhm.
could get some real analog synths in there and have them play and do cool stuff, I would, of course, I want the Ferrari, you know?
Yeah.
For me, I think it's
It's
somewhat
just the
genre
experience, it's
dependent
having
as well.
the like, I mean, you can't on a VST, I couldn't flip on my Moog and watch, yeah, okay, I blew the circuit again. And as you're playing, you can do things like, okay, well, here I can switch my oscillator and here's the filter sweep and things like that. And I have no idea if you can see what I was just doing, but it's that hands-on thing. And it's, in many ways, it's kind of like what a, playing the piano. There's a difference between playing an electric piano and feeling the vibes of the hammers on the strings.
I think that's what
It's
we're
not
starting
the
to get
same
into.
thing,
We're talking about vibes,
but similar.
which makes sense to me. I mean, I think like what you're talking about partially, I think, is the feel of the instrument, your ability to create the sound that you're looking for, that is like finely tuned to like the style of music that you're doing. Like for me,
it's the physical connection,
Yeah, it's like
touching
tactile.
and just having the knobs and the buttons, the tactile experience.
Yeah, for sure. Huh.
And the fact that it's an expensive toy that I couldn't afford when I was a kid. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with both of you guys. I think it's incredible what can be done in the box, but I think sometimes there's an intangible thing that you get into with certain analog things, whatever. I'll tell you a little story briefly. Years ago, I worked as an assistant for a friend of mine who had a 24-track 2-inch analog studio. And it was amazing. It was awesome. Everything sounded great. And one of the things that you guys probably know about is the sort of warmth that going in hot a little bit. Did I lose you guys?
You're back.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
get back now.
Yeah, the warmth that you get when you're going in hot to the 2-inch tape a little bit adds the saturation, but it's not like ugly distortion. So first of all, there was that, which is incredible. But the thing that was most interesting to me was we were doing a session with a guy, and it was just a piano with reverb on it, basically, an acoustic piano with reverb on it. And we were recording onto analog, and we were recording onto digital, like a DAT or whatever. And in the studio environment afterwards, he told me, analog sounds way better. And it's like, yeah, I can't really hear the difference. But in the studio environment, he did a A/B of the analog versus the digital. And it was totally clear that the analog sounded better. Now, by the time somebody's listening to it on a CD or downloading it on Spotify or whatever, can you hear that difference? I don't know. But I mean, at that point, for sure, I definitely became a believer in some of the magic of analog. And actually, as a result, I've discovered, I don't know if you guys use any of this, but some of these like tape saturation plugins, like I use something called J37, which emulates the saturation of the Abbey Road tape machine. And it's really nice. Like it adds a weird little intangible warmth and saturation that's really subtle, but feels good. I really like it.
Another question I got through an email. This could be a little controversial, but does home recording hurt the scene? I guess meaning, does it saturate a genre?
Creativity will always be rewarded. So,
it expands the scene. I mean, it makes it, it democratizes it, makes it there for people who otherwise couldn't afford it, the studio experience. If part of the scene is gatekeeping, then yeah, it hurts that.
Yeah, the scene is what
Yeah.
you make it. You know, you just crash those walls down and do whatever you want to do. If people like it, they'll listen to it. If not, they won't. You know,
Well,
make your music.
exactly. That's the
It
thing.
makes
think-
sense.
Like
think
the sea of noise gets larger, but if you can stand
Right.
out from it, you know, the reward's greater. So
That's exactly how I feel too. Like I was doing music back when there was no Spotify, and it was really difficult to get heard. Like
Mhm.
it's like, who's going to hear your music? Well, here's a cassette tape. Do you want to listen to it? Maybe you'd get a gig someplace and 20 people would show up, and if you're lucky, they'd like it or whatever. It was a real struggle from that point of view. On the other hand, there wasn't a giant sea of noise to cut through. But if I had to choose between the two, I much prefer the current day situation where you can get out there and get heard. I mean, I'm sure all of you guys can relate to this, where you have streams and listens all around the globe. It's crazy. It's like people are listening to this in Kazakhstan. Like, what the hell? How did that happen?
it's always crazy to me when I'll have like
I mean, that's more
one
of a question of
listener in like 20
distribution
different
than
countries, and it's like,
democratized, you know,
who
it's
is that
like
one person?
Distro Kid.
I know.
Going back to what we mentioned before I hit record, the Spotify thing, the algorithms. Is that something that is a problem, or do you see it more like a challenge, trying to get your music heard?
It's definitely a problem. The problem
sure.
is
Well, it's
centralization.
easier with the scene.
So a lot of these distributors are using the old model of, you know, they're trying to make money, right? So if they can sell you on a dream, they're going to collect from you, and they're going to collect from the customer through advertising, and try to keep the customer engaged. So if your music keeps the person engaged, then they're going to keep selling that. Well, I think a lot of times what that turns into is musical fads, where everything becomes a particular genre of the month, and they push that. And unfortunately, it's not good for discovery. It's really good for their bottom line, but it's not good for discovery. And I think that does also tie into the whole idea of there's more musicians than ever before. That gives them more choice than ever before, and they can pick the top 1% of the top 1% of the most listened to names and artists and people that spend the most money promoting themselves. And so it's not about discoverability, it's about sell marketability, I guess. And so I would just say the platforms we have now are part of the problem, and the number of people in it are part of that particular problem. Although I am not against more people being a part of it, just means that the quality of music is going to go up over time, and there's going to be more choice than we've ever had before. So I kind of like that.
Like it's a little bit like trying to go viral on Twitter or something, as far as the algorithm aspect is concerned. My hope is that if your stuff is good enough, it will find an audience given time, regardless of all that. But I mean, trying to play with the algorithm to be like, oh man, Spotify put me on this and now I got a million streams this month. I mean, it could happen, but it's sort of like trying to come up with the right combination of a cat jumping off a roof or playing a guitar or whatever on Twitter and hoping that it goes viral and you get 1 million followers. It's a little bit of a goofy thing. I think it's really one of the things that I think is problematic with the connection between social media and music nowadays is I think it's really easy to be in some kind of situation where, like, okay, I posted this and more people said they liked this than the last thing I did. So I'm going to change everything I do to get more likes on Facebook or whatever. And that's like, that will totally destroy, in my opinion, like a proper and pure like creative output. I think it's really important not to distort what you're doing based on who the hell knows is even commenting. Like who even are these people, and why do we necessarily care about what their opinion is?
Who cares what robots listen to?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know, but I mean, at least for me, I try to guard myself against being influenced by what social media feedback is on the stuff that I do. I think that can really mess you up.
I always say make yourself the target. Like if you're the target audience, right? And you're
Right.
only aiming to make yourself happy, then if you're happy at the end, it doesn't matter how it does. And chances are that other people are going to like it because it's authentic. And the
Absolutely.
authenticity is what wins out. And like,
Yes.
that's why when people try to start shoehorning themselves into a lane they don't fit in, it's transparent. You know what I mean?
Totally. And you hear that from artists in all across history, all across the world. I mean, Martin Scorsese said that about making films. He makes movies that he would like to see.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the only way you can go.
Because otherwise, who are you doing it for?
Yeah. That's why when people say to me, and I think you said this, Mike, in one of the getting to know interviews, something like, do you listen to your own music? Yeah, I do.
Exactly.
Because I create music that I like. And if I like it, probably somebody else will at some point too. It's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay too. But if I like it, somebody's going to like it. That's kind of
that acceptance, that like willingness to accept that like you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea is something that I wish everyone could understand because you won't please everyone. So like trying to please people over here, you're going to alienate these people. And then when you try and please those people, you're going to alienate someone else. So it's like, make yourself the target, cut out the middleman.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to get super watered down music, right? You're trying to please too many people. You're going to get something that's kind of cut in so many different ways. It's no longer you.
Well, like I did hip hop production in like the early 2000s and whatnot. And I remember I had a production partner in New York and we would like, yo, let's make a Neptune style beat. Let's make a Timbaland style beat. And that's cool. But we are not Neptunes or Timbaland.
Yeah.
right.
And that shit does not sound like Neptunes or Timbaland. It sounds like someone trying to make a beat that sounds like Neptunes or Timbaland.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
you know, like I've wasted so much time aiming for other targets, thinking that it would bring people to it. When in all honesty, the most success I've ever had has come from when I said, fuck it, I'm doing what I want.
Yeah,
And
people
making
want-
myself happy. So
every one of us, we have a
Fuck
thing
it,
that
Merry
only
Christmas.
we can do. Other people can't do what I do. Nobody can do what you do. Like, you can only be you. If you try to be somebody else, you're just going to be a crappy version of them.
but it takes a certain level of self-confidence to buy into yourself. You know what I mean? And it's not narcissism, and it's not like, you know, thinking you're the shit. It's just like the belief in that what you're doing is like an honest piece of work.
Yeah.
And if it is, it'll resonate with someone, not everyone, but someone. You know?
Well, and that goes kind of back to the home production question earlier, in the sense that, you know, if you're just sitting down to create something that sounds exactly like a carbon copy of something else, and that's your intent at your art or whatever, then it might be a little easier because you do have a basic template. But to get to that realization of, this is like, I'm creating this for myself. I don't really care, you know, about metrics and all that. I just want to create something, put it out in the world. It takes like, I know it took me a while to get to that point, you know, like, yeah, but genre, whatever, you know, just to be able to be, that confidence in your own self to say, this is what I'm doing. I'm proud of it. I like it. Someone else will. And if they don't, well, that's okay too. Yeah. And I think that would be a barrier to a lot becoming successful from home production and things like that, because you have this expectation like, oh, this will be the next mega hit, and it's not. And like, if you can't accept that, it's going to be a really bad time.
Right. And the reason that it's probably not going to be the next greatest hit is because of the noise. Like, that is the other part of it, right? Like, you know, the democratization made it easy for everyone. So like, now you don't need the label, but you're also in that sea of noise. So you need that uniqueness to set you apart. And like, that was, you know, I was talking about like starting in hip hop, like in the 90s, when I had started as a DJ, everyone was different. Everyone sounded unique.
Yes.
And if anyone
You could
sounded
put
like
on a
someone
record,
else,
you could tell
it
who
was
that
beef.
was.
You are not allowed to sound like someone.
Yes.
And now I could not tell you who anyone is. I can't tell them apart. It's like Redman. He said, "Some of y'all are Coke and Pepsi. I can't tell the difference." And that's what it is. And
I think,
honestly, like,
go ahead.
I feel like synthwave got to that to a certain point to where like certain people fell into that template and just didn't get out of it. And it's like the people that steer that slightly different part or don't like adhere to like the strictest dogma are the people that you notice because it's a little different and it's not, you know, exactly like everyone else.
The way I kind of see it is genre is kind of like language or style or accent, and songs are kind of like conversation. You don't compose a sentence for yourself, even though you're saying what you want to say. You're composing a sentence in order to communicate information to somebody else. So when I'm making music and I'm making a song, I want to convey a feeling or an emotion, and I want to get that feeling emotion across. Now, I wouldn't particularly say that I'm making the song directly for myself, but I am saying what I want to say. And I think that's kind of, it like hits all the points, right? Because this gets talked about a lot, like I only do it for myself, and it's not necessarily true, but I do get what you're trying to say, which is I'm doing this because I have something to say, and I can only say it the way I know how to say it, but I do want other people to interact with it. So it's not a fully selfish endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not that I'm not interested in other people hearing and enjoying what I create. And I think that's universal for any artist. If you're a painter, whatever, you want people to see what you create, I think. But I think the problem lies in trying to mutate your creative output to impersonate something else. It's like when you're in middle school and the guy that all the girls like, you try to look like him and act like him and wear the same clothes. It's not going to work. You can't, it's not going to work. You can't do that. You have to be yourself. And I think creatively, man, it's all about what is unique to each of us that creates something of value. So if you throw that out, I think you're kind of lost. But one of the things that I think is a challenge with all the Spotify and all this stuff, you know, whenever you submit anything, it's always like, what genre are you? I don't know about you guys, but for me, many times it's like, I don't know what genre I am. Many of my songs, I'm like, well, it's a little bit like this and it's some of that. And so that is pressure to create something that's going to be a little bit easier to pitch and explain what it is that you're doing. That I think can be tough.
That's why we just threw that out the window and created our own.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you know, it like we've said, it's kind of this sea of noise, right? So you create your own thing, coin your own genre, and just do whatever you want to do and start building your community other ways, you know, like we've built a lot of community through Twitter. We stream on Twitch, you know, there's ways to get yourself out there, I think, beyond just the standard everyday, you know, algorithms. So I think building that diehard, that niche community that supports you and kind of sings your praises is a huge piece of this nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, the community aspect is huge. And I've done the whole genre crossing thing, and it's kind of like speaking Russian and Chinese and English at the same time, and people don't understand what you were trying to do. And it's cinematic, but it's rap, but it's not, but it's rock. And it's like, I think what really helped me was actually working with Dr. Sector because he's learning. So I'm relearning a lot of stuff. I think someone said it perfectly when they were like, you learn the most when you're teaching someone else what you know. And because you don't really know it that well until you have to re-examine it. And it's really like what made me, I felt like some of the things we were doing was getting us stuck in a genre, but what I realized was I was being too complicated. I've been doing music for too long, and I feel like the next thing has to be so much different than this other thing, or has to have this new innovative way, and it can't be like this, and I need to do the drums this way or slightly different than everybody else. And when it comes down to it, sometimes they figured out the way the kick drum should sound for that genre. So maybe you can change it a little bit, but don't stray too far, you know? So I think sometimes we get a little bit carried away with this, I need to be unique. you need to be unique enough so that someone can identify who you are, but you don't need to be so unique that no one knows what the heck you're saying. And I think that's kind of like a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, because we're creatives and we like to come up with all these different new ideas. And it's like, well, I have to be inside of a box now. And what working with Dr. Sector is like, well, he's stuck in a learning curve box, right? So I can't get him to do everything I want him to do over the internet. So it actually causes me to have to rein it in and go, these are the tools I have to work with. And it actually kind of formed its own genre, which I thought was interesting.
I think for me, I don't feel pressure to try to be different and unique. I almost feel like to a certain extent, what I create just kind of like happens by itself. I don't know if you guys kind of feel that way. Like the best stuff that I do comes out kind of how it wants to come out. And if I try to force it into being something that my rational mind wants it to be, it's not as good. So I guess what I'm saying is, for me, sometimes I feel like I wish my stuff fit more into a genre. I don't think there's anything wrong, by the way, in being clearly in a certain genre at all. I think that it's interesting how you back to the whole Spotify conversation. It's interesting that the whole game is kind of set up based on, first, we want to know what genre you are. And for me, sometimes it's tough. And my stuff varies from song to song too. So, but I mean, my answer to that was like, look, the same thing we were talking about before. If I like it, there are probably other people that will like it. And you know, if I like multiple different styles of things, other people probably will too. So I just got to like follow what seems cool to me.
The last questions, is it important to have a label?
And Hertzog, was it you that was saying you've experienced both? Because I've only released anything on my own, so I have no point of reference.
Well, so like as VHXRR, we released our first album through Lakeshore Records, and we released everything after that on our own. And we've had more success on our own than we had through the label. And there's like red tape and bullshit with the label, you know, like where we can use songs and where we can't, and licensing them for compilations, you have to pay a lawyer to draw up the paperwork, you know. It's just like bullshit that you don't need and that you could have done on your own, you know what I mean? Like if a label is going to give you $1 million advance and a $250,000 media budget, take the fucking deal. But if they're not doing that and it's just going to be like a normal kind of, you know, run-of-the-mill deal, do it yourself. Do it yourself. It's a little more legwork, but it's worth it.
Who was it that was saying earlier? I don't know if it was Night Razor, but somebody was saying that back in the day, success was, oh, I got signed, I got a record deal. Yeah, but I guess it's not not the same as it was. The whole landscape.
Napster killed it, right?
Well, yeah, back in the day, I mean, though, there were like there are the 5 labels, and now you've got these hundreds of things. You know, we didn't have Aztec, and we didn't have, you know, NRW and stuff like that in the day. It was Sony and Columbia, and I guess they're the same thing, and, you know, RCA. So getting signed meant something very different than it would now, especially in a genre like this, a subgenre.
Well, like 9 Inch Nails originally was signed to TVT Records. And
TVT.
yeah, for Jimmy Iovine to like pry them away to Interscope. Like, I don't know if anyone watched the Defiant ones. The Defiant ones is fucking amazing. Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, it's kind of like how they came from nothing and then sold beats to Apple for $1 billion. It's that story. And it's like 4 episodes long, and it's actually what broke my writer's block. Like after The Persistence of Memory, I hadn't written anything, and then COVID hit, and we were like stuck in the house, and I was waking up at like 3 a.m. because my sleep cycles were all fucked. And I got up at 3 a.m. and I came down to the studio and I was like, my buddy's been telling me to watch the Defiant ones for like years. So boop, I put it on. I watched all 4 episodes back to back to back to back, and I wrote 3 new songs.
That's cool.
It was just the inspiration of watching creative people, you know?
Yeah. Just take a moment. I'm sure everybody can relate to this. To really say thanks to you for all the support that you give independent artists and give us a sort of platform to get our name out there a little bit. It's really great.
I appreciate it.
And you know, so many people out there that are doing stuff like that. It's all about making money off the artists, you know. But I feel lucky to have run into you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I like to promote the stuff.
Very much the same.
I've always been like that ever since mid '90s, late '90s. I had a lot of friends that were DJs, and we'd be in the record stores, you know, randomly picking out. Let's see what this sounds like. Yeah. You know, now at least we can sample it before we buy it. But back then it was, well, this looks cool. You know, let's take it home and see how it sounds. Yeah. So a lot of it came from that, going into the city, New York City. Same thing, CDs. Oh, I wonder how this sounds. I was always into electronic too, so that kind of got me going with the scene, with that electronic music. I guess the last thing I'm going to say, if you guys want to promote anything, feel free. Anything coming out, anything you want to talk about, we'll wrap it up that way.
I got a couple singles coming out. One is coming out in about a week. The other one's coming out in about 30 days. And like I was saying, I'm going to try to release singles rather than an EP now. Do a single every maybe 60 days or something like that. I have 6 ready to go. So you can find me Electronic Ghost Machine on anywhere you can find music, pretty much.
I got some remixes coming out. Tonebox and Demi K and Jacket are all doing remixes for me right now. I haven't given them a deadline though, so I don't know when that's going to be.
I would like to promote what we do on Twitch, and I would encourage other people to do the same thing. There's a huge music and DJ community on Twitch that I think doesn't get talked about a lot. And we collaborate all the time. So to answer your question, if you want to show up to a stream and start typing away and give suggestions and throw stuff at us, that is what we do. Over the weekend, if you're ever bored around 8 o'clock at night, the Eastern time, me and Dr. Sector are on there pounding out beats and figuring out cool effects and stuff. And if you know anything about Ableton, hit us up and tell us a cool plugin or something you want to see, and we'll implement it. I mean, let them know, Dr. Sector, what we do. I mean, you're the guy driving it, so.
Yeah, we do a lot of community involvement type stuff like that. In fact, we'll write songs for people. We've written a couple songs for other people's streams for their intros and things like that. We also just recently did a collaboration with our buddy Nanoverse. So getting to that concept of doing collabs, that one turned out really great, and I was excited to see what he did with the work that we put together. So we do have another album that'll be coming out this year, our second full-length album. I'm shooting for about halfway through the year to get it done, but we're working on that right now.
We've got ours, our cover of The Night Begins to Shine. It's on Bandcamp now. It'll be heading to streaming on the 28th. And then April, we're going to do like our first full length. So yeah, it'll be fun. Just hanging out, making some music.
VHXRR, we're going to have our third EP dropping this year, which will wrap up the Cosmos trilogy. Just today, at like 6 p.m., I sent off the final masters for Zarina's album. It's done. Dude. It's finished. It was a lot. And it's over. I'm thrilled. And my website for my studio.
I'm looking forward to that one. Looking forward to Vero's new album. Yeah,
it's big. It sounds
and
big.
The videos.
But she has some softer songs on it too, but they still feel grand. I don't know, she's got that vibe, you know. We tried to do something different for her, and I love what we did. And then my website, thesocialclub.studio, I just updated my portfolio recently, some Liquid Modern stuff in there. So please stop by, have a look. And I think that's it. Thank you. Again, thanks for doing
Awesome,
it.
guys.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
I'll leave
thanks.
links. I'll leave links
It was
in this
nice to
video.
meet you all.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you.
Outside of Twitter, you know?
Yeah, exactly. We can
Yeah.
see each other's
Outside
faces.
of Twitter.
If there's
not read
anything
the
that I
word.
can do to help promote you guys, retweet you guys, whatever, I mean, I don't mind being tagged. I don't mind if you DM me. I always feel a little bit reluctant. Like I did a pre-save tweet today and I sort of felt bad tagging people, you know, I just feel like reluctant, you know, I don't want to over self-promote, but I certainly will do anything that I can to help you guys.
Ditto.
Likewise.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Awesome.